Hello. Today we're going to talk for just a minute about the atlas listings. We're trying to go through this kind of quickly. In the case of the atlas, previously we had a single landmark, like with the spine. We talked about the spinous process being the landmark. With the occiput, we said that the bottom of the condyles is a landmark. In this case, we're using several landmarks. So first we're going to use the anterior tubercle. That'll be the first two letters of the atlas listing. Will tell us what the anterior tubercle is doing. Secondly, we'll be using the atlas as a unit. The whole atlas is we're going to talk about what it does. And then finally, what the transverse process on the side of laterality, because we're going to be interested in that side of laterality. So we'll be saying whether that transverse process is either anterior or posterior. It gets simpler when you actually see the pieces of it. So the first letter is A. Traditionally they said it indicated the atlas had translated anteriorly, so you have a little bit of a forward slide on the atlas, but there's probably some reasons why it really doesn't do that. We've got a lot of structures here that will prevent it from doing that, because having the odontoid process in the spinal canal is not a good idea. So because of the presence of these transverse ligaments, check ligaments, that's unlikely to have very much movement. So according to the Plogger text, it's probably better to state that the atlas rotates around the x-axis, and as it does so, it may appear to slide anteriorward. So all of our atlas listings are going to begin with the letter A. Okay, now Plogger, in the Plogger text, they reference that motion as a plus Z for the translation orthogonally, and then they put it in parentheses. And note that the parentheses indicate Dr. Plogger doesn't quite accept the concept of A meaning anterior. Okay, but that's how they do it orthogonally. So we're saying A means atlas, or as I say, a lot of folks say that it might mean slightly anterior. And there'll be a way that we'll talk, that will, when we go to set up on the segment, that will actually take that into account. S or I, we're talking about the anterior tubercle. And this indicates that that structure has tilted either superiorly or inferiorly. And if we're looking at a lateral x-ray, you'll be able to see that. Here's what we're looking at. On the lateral film, here's your atlas, there's your C2 with the odontoid, and there's your anterior tubercle right there. So we're talking about pivoting around the x-axis, so it's either minus theta x or plus theta x. So if the tubercle is superior, if these two lines right here, this is a A to P atlas plane line, and this is called the odontoid perpendicular line, theoretically they should be pretty close to parallel. In this case, they're diverging, they're separating anteriorly, so that means the tubercle has gone S. In this case, they are converging anteriorly, and so this means the tubercle has gone inferiorly. Next, we have right or left. So now we're saying the whole atlas is got a rightward slide or a leftward slide. Now the atlas actually moves a little more, the motion's a little more complex than that, but for simplicity's sake, we're saying it's right or left. So here's what we'd be seeing if we're on the film. This is a transverse atlas plane line that we'll learn how to draw later, and this is a C2 baseline. And ideally, these two lines would be parallel. As the atlas moves lateral, under normal circumstances, it will dip down like this, but when it gets subluxated, something else happens. And Dr. Gonstead theorized that this capsule got irritated and swollen, and it actually lifted it up because he was finding these open wedges on the side of the atlas laterality. So this is what we would call a right lateral atlas, because subluxation creates a different circumstance, right? So this one is a, if it's gone off to the right, that's a negative X translation. That's a simple way to describe it. And this one is atlas to the left. Did I say left up here? This is a right translation of the atlas, which is a negative X translation. This one is a positive X translation, or a left atlas. And then finally, the side of the atlas that we're interested in, that lateral side, we're going to find out if it is P or A. So this is a theta Y, plus or minus theta Y type movement. So in this case, this is sitting in a positive theta Y malposition. Okay, but it's, if you want to think about it from restrictions, it's a right rotation restriction because it won't turn to the right. That makes the left TVP posterior in this case, and the right TVP anterior. Now, depending on which side we're actually setting up on, that's going to dictate whether we use the P or the A. This one's just the other direction. This one's in a negative theta Y malposition. Sorry, Yeah, that's negative theta y malposition. It's also going to be a left rotation restriction because this part of the atlas won't pivot to the left. So that's a right posterior or left anterior depending on what you're dealing with. So you might have some atlas listings that look like this, ASR. And you could actually have a situation where that S isn't there and you just put a dash, A-R. But here's some examples. A, atlas, superior tubercle has tilted, the anterior tubercle has tilted superiorly, and that would be a negative theta x. And then the whole atlas is shifted to the right, or negative x translation. So there's your superior tubercle. There's your atlas to the right. And because of the irritation in the joint, we're going to wind up with an open wedge on that side. ASLA. A means, that's right, A means atlas for us. S means the anterior tubercle is superior. We have those diverging lines. Left translation, and that left side of the atlas is anterior. AI. Now we don't see as many AIs. The tubercle tends to go up, but you will see them. So the anterior tubercle is inferior. It's gone down. The whole atlas is to the right. And so we'll see that open wedge on the right. And the right transverse process is rotated posteriorly. So it's not going to come forward. That's a left rotation restriction. This is, we're going to call this a right lateral flexion restriction because the way when we test this under normal circumstances, when you lean to the right, that should close down, and it doesn't. And then this guy is simply a positional thing. We're going to have to do some observation to find this. So we'll talk about that when we get into the motion pal.